The Charlottesville monument, at the center of one of the ugliest episodes of the Trump era, and there were a lot of them, is down today. Crowds cheering as the city removed the controversial statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee this weekend, along with monuments to Confederate General Stonewall Jackson and two others the city deemed offensive to Native Americans.
Taking down this statue is one small step closer to the goal of helping Charlottesville, Virginia, and America grapple with its sin of being willing to destroy Black people for economic gain.
This was years in the making. In 2017, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other extremists violently protested Charlottesville's plans at the deadly Unite the Right rally, which resulted in the death of Heather Heyer. Trump ignited a national firestorm to declaring that the rally had good people, very fine people on both sides, a statement that made it clear that Trump empathized with white terrorists, an idea that many politicians and media people at the time did not want to admit. Joe Biden has said that Trump's response to Charlottesville inspired him to actually run for president. For activists in Charlottesville, it is a hard-fought victory after legal hurdles along the way. Years ago, one former city council member telling reporters confidently, quote, "We will win." Joining me now is that former city council member, Dr. Wes Bellamy, led the charge on removing the statue. He's now chair of the political science department at Virginia State University, so he now outranks me. Dr. Bellamy, it is good to see you this evening. I want to start off with this. Tell me, you and I met during coverage after the Unite the Right rally 4 years ago now. I want to play some audio of the president, the then president at the time, discussing this, and I want you to sort of take us back to how you were thinking about this at the time.
Not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Spirit and faith and love. There was such love at that rally. They were peaceful people. These were great people.
Wes, that's your home where you, your wife, your kids, your friends, your co-workers are. Take us back for a moment. How did you feel when you heard then President Trump saying there were fine people on both sides, and then even to this day, 4 years later, hearing him say, hey, look, you know, these people were nice and friendly and lovely?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Johnson, my good brother, for having me on today. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And I think you know firsthand, as you spent time with myself and my family and our friends on the ground while everything was transpiring, just how traumatic it was. I will say, initially seeing that piece, I'm so glad that I do not have to see the orange tan on 45's face every day on television anymore. And furthermore, I just think about how ridiculous and insensitive this one individual was. And he was the leader of our nation and still in many ways the leader of the Republican Party. When you think about the fact that opposed to calling and saying, well, you know, is there anything that we can do? Is there, where we're offering prayers and condolences? Someone literally lost their life. One of his cronies killed someone that day. He chose to call those same individuals fine people on both sides. And this was, in my opinion, the epitome of what we saw transpire on January 6th of the past year. This was also what we saw across the country in terms of white supremacy and how these people, these lunatics, are truly believing that we are taking something away from them, that this is their nation. I'm just very proud that not only these statues are gone, but we're to let them know, yeah, we're taking a lot of stuff from you because our ancestors promised us this, and we're coming to take back everything that's ours right here, right now.
So, Dr. Bellamy, I also want to point out, and I think this is important, that this was a political process as well, right? The current mayor and members of city council. Tell us a little bit about what it took on the ground politically to make this happen. I mean, obviously, there was a terror attack, there was national attention, but you and I both know when the cameras, the national cameras and the international cameras leave, a lot of times the momentum for change magically dissipates. How did you keep this energy going to finally remove these statues 4 years later?
Well, this is literally a 5-year process in the making. And for some, they would say it's nearly 8 years. For me, it started in 2013 when I ran for council the first time. I had a campaign cookout at the then known as Lee Park. And there were about 70 elders who came to me the next day expressing their disappointment in the fact in which we had the campaign cookout based off of the people and what has transpired at that park, specifically faces being slashed, people being spat on, Black people not being allowed to go into that park. History that a lot of folks who at that time didn't know about. And then you fast forward a couple of years later, you have a 15-year-old ninth grader, Ziona Bryant. She writes a petition, and she and I are conversing and talking about what are different ways in which we can get energy around it. She writes a petition saying to her classmates at Charlottesville High School, statue should be removed. Subsequently, after that, I spoke to my colleagues and said, hey, there's a ninth grader who's courageous enough to write a petition about this statue being moved. I was the leading vote getter. I firmly believe that this is the will of the people. We need to do something about this. One of my colleagues, Ms. Kristen Sekos, who had been talking about statue removal for a very long time, who was the original person to say that Lee Jackson holiday should no longer be celebrated in our area and got that passed in 2013. He was on board and said, Wes, I'm absolutely with you. I called a press conference, Kristen, I called the press conference in March of 2016, and it was at that point in which we kicked everything off. Subsequently, we had a Blue Ribbon Commission come forth and provide a recommendation. The next year in 2017, because that took about 10 months, 2017, we had a formal vote in which we were allowed to be able to move forward with a 3-2 vote. Myself, Ms. Sekos, and Mr. Bob Fenwick, our mayor, and one of our other councilors, Kathy Galvin, they voted against removal, but we had a 3-2 vote to get the statues removed. We were then subsequently sued, and it was caught up in litigation for about 2.5 years. But in the midst of that, I mean, my family, we've had every kind of death threat you can think of, the lug nuts pulled off of our family vehicle, you name it, has happened.
And I want to say this, I have to personally and politically thank you for that level of dedication, because I want the audience to understand when people like Dr. Bellamy come forward and push to have these statues removed, it's not just political. Their families are in danger as well. As a UVA alum and as a friend, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Dr. Wes Bellamy.
Thank you for having me, my brother, and thank you for all that you're doing. And hey, those statues are going. Black people, if we can move these statues, they told me this would never happen. Let's imagine what else we can do. Let's stick together. Let's keep the work. There's more work to be done.